welcome to Tell Us Something. It's been a long time. Thank you also for being here. I'm saving paper today, so I'm reading everything off my phone. Tell Us Something acknowledges that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. The land we walk on, recreate on, grow our food on, and live on is sacred land. Being mindful is a practice. We may not always be mindful of the gift that the land gives us and the wisdom that it has. We take this moment to honor the land and its native people and the stories that they and it share with us. This presentation is being recorded by the Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistance grant donated to Tell Us Something by MCAT. Thank you so much to our title sponsor, Blackfoot Communications, for the continued support of helping people get their stories heard. And thank all of you for choosing to be here this evening. I know you have a lot of choices about how to spend your time and money, and we are all very grateful that you're here. Because it's been a while since we've shared space together, I want to give you a rundown of how tonight works, especially for the new folks. Do we have new folks in the crowd? Oh, a handful. Okay. So generally we have 8 storytellers sharing a story, and tonight we have 7 storytellers and a surprise. The theme is Stone Soup, so each storyteller has 10 minutes to share their true personal story on that theme, Stone Soup, in any way that they wish to interpret it. At the 9-minute mark, so there's a little timer down here that the storytellers can see, and at the 9-minute mark, board member Jason Forges, who was our timekeeper, is going to give us a little gong. Jason, that's what it sounds like. And that's not like, get off the stage, you're doing a bad job. That's like, hey, storyteller, I know you're in the middle of it right now, and you're reliving that moment, and that's good, and you're almost ready to run out of time. It's not like, get off the stage. It's like, remember where you are. And it's also for you all to go, okay, they're almost finished. So there's that. For anybody that's not been in the Wilma, restrooms are upstairs. Accessible restrooms are downstairs. If you need to use the accessible restroom, you can talk to someone at the bar, one of the staff members. Remember to wash your hands thoroughly. After using the restroom, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth if you can. Thank you for wearing a mask if you brought one. If you want one and you didn't bring one, there are some at the merch table. The merch table being staffed by board member Sarah Fitzgerald. Thanks, Sarah. And at the merch table, we have double-walled pint cups, tote bags, and a variety of posters to choose from, and free stickers to anyone that wants them. When you entered the theater, board member Jason Sloat and Tell Us Something longtime volunteer Lauren Champa were standing there giving you opportunities to share your stories anonymously. You can write your story on that little piece of paper, turn it in there's a box at the merch table and there's a box at the bar. At intermission, they will go through those and select a handful to be read from the stage directly after intermission. So that's all anonymous. And I'm the only one allowed to use a cell phone tonight. So please silence your cell phones and other mobile devices. You came to listen. Let the listening begin. It is important to actively listen to one another, join together, and support one another by sharing stories. When we do this, we can better connect with our own individual stories, with each other, and with our community. This is your community. These are your stories. Thank you for your support of each other and of each other's stories. Tell Us Something believes that everyone has a story and everyone's story matters. Know this, sometimes Tell Us Something stories have adult themes and have adult language. All right. Our first storyteller tonight, Tess Sneeringer, Tess Sneeringer grew up escaping the suits and stress of Washington, D.C. by following her older brother down the current of the Potomac River every summer. She is now settled in Missoula and works for Parks and Recreation. Tonight's story takes place during her days as a seasonal outdoor educator in the Southwest. Please welcome Tess Sneeringer.
So 4 of us were floating down the Green River in Utah in 2 different canoes, and they were tied together, and 2 of us were paddling, 1 of us was taking a power nap, and the 4th person was managing some extreme pain with a substance that is now illegal in Montana. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning. This trip had started earlier that day as the long-awaited personal trip after a grueling summer spent backpacking with teenagers in the woods, and spirits were high when we launched earlier that day. And I remember when we pulled over for lunch on this beach on the side of the river, I had pulled up the canoe, was sitting on the bow, and was dipping crackers into hummus when I heard my friend Erica yelp behind me. And I look over, and she's about 20 yards downstream on the bank, and all I see is this cloud of sandstone dust. And she's over there with our friend Katrina, so I wander over. I guess what had happened is she had been climbing up this little bluff to get a picnic spot, and this big chunk of sandstone had broken out from under her, and she'd fallen about 10 feet. And she was standing, and she was limping and complaining about her knee. And of the 4 of us, 3 of us are wilderness first responders, and the 4th is an EMT. So we kind of dove into our knee assessment situation, but at some point she looked up at me and she goes, "Tess, I think my back is bleeding." And she was wearing a white sun shirt, so we hadn't seen any blood, but I lift up her shirt, and sure enough, I see a 5-inch long, centimeter wide, just gaping wound, as if someone had cut her with a knife. And it was, sure enough, slowly bleeding down her back. So I put her shirt down, and it takes every ounce of me to tell her, "Yes, your back is bleeding. I'm gonna get the first aid kit. I'll be right back." And I tried so hard not to sprint to the canoe and instead use that time to calm my own nerves down, get the first aid kit, come back. By that point, we had her laying face down. Everybody had seen the cut at this point. And Jack, the other trip mate, and Katrina had made a plan to try to go get cell phone service, and they'd put me in charge of first aid. And there I am standing over her with my desert rat sundress and my big floppy hat and now 2 blue nitrile gloves, thinking, okay, it is time to put you back together. And as I said, it looked like someone cut her with a knife. And granted, we never found what sliced her, but the first aid was relatively simple. So we were still waiting for Jack and Katrina to get back when she asked me, she goes, "Tess, why is everybody freaking out?" And I was just like, without trying to make her freak out even more, explained hey, your cut is big enough that we're worried about infection, and your knee is in enough pain that we can't be here for 5 days, which was the plan. So we gotta go. And the way that this river works is we're on the Green River, paddling towards the confluence with the Colorado River, and the Green River is flat water, and the Colorado River is white water, so you can't just paddle out. You schedule a motorboat to pick you up at the beach that's the intersection of the 2 rivers, and we had scheduled a boat for 5 days from then. It was about a 50-mile trip. That's a really relaxed river trip, 10 miles a day, plenty of time for side hikes, relaxing. So we had scheduled it for 5 days from then. But as we were looking through our paperwork from our outfitter and the permits, we saw that they'd given us a schedule of all the other boats that were coming while we were on our trip. There was 2 boats, one which was ours 5 days from now, and the only other one scheduled was the very next morning at 10 o'clock. So we had to cover about 45 miles by 10 o'clock in the morning. But if you remember those teenage trips, one of the ones that I led the most often, involved a canoe trip, and to make our mileage on the last day, we had a routine of waking the kids up at 3 o'clock in the morning, putting them in boats, tying the boats together, and paddling this flotilla of canoes down a very similar desert river. So I knew it could be done, and doing some quick, rough math, I thought we had just enough hours if we paddled through the night. So Jack and Christina get back from their short-lived attempt to find cell phone service. I pitch this plan to them, suggest that we paddle until dinner time, pull over, eat food, can't forget to eat food, paddle, pull over, sleep for a couple hours, and launch again around midnight and paddle until we hopefully get to the boat. And as we were paddling that evening, they said yes to the plan. As we were paddling, we were booking it, so everybody we passed could tell we were in a situation. Our boats are tied together, and we're paddling with like 80% effort. And everyone we passed, as soon as they learned what our situation was, they had something to give us. Someone had extra Vicodin from an old wisdom tooth surgery. I'm not kidding. They gave us new first aid supplies to change her dressing, and an older gentleman even offered us his paddling chocolate, which was weed chocolate, for his arthritis, which was very, very generous. And so we paddled, we executed that plan just how I lined it out, and we launched again at midnight after a horrible, anxiety-ridden hour of sleep. And we made it about 2 hours until Jack, who's in the front of my canoe, turns around, and he's like, Tess, I don't know if this is gonna work. I'm falling asleep. I don't know if we're gonna make it. And so we came up with a new plan involving naps, so that every 20 minutes, one of the 3 paddlers got to take a nap. And because we had tied the boats together, right? So there's 3 paddlers, and we tried to make Erica as comfortable as we could. That's a tall order when you have a bum knee, a huge gash in your back, and it's a metal boat. But we tried our best. And when it was my turn to nap, I was out cold. I put my sleeping bag on my feet, I'd pull it over me, and people had to shake me awake when it was my turn to paddle again. But we kept that rotation going all night long until finally the sun came up and we were tasked with figuring out where the heck we were. Because all night I'd been trying to estimate how fast are we going, how many hours have we been paddling, continually trying to answer the question, are we going to make it? And so when the sun came up, I had to use all that mental math to be like, okay, I think we're about 15 miles away from the takeout. And how the map works is river miles are labeled on the map, and in this case, they were counting down to the confluence. But sure, there's a line on the map that says 15, but that doesn't mean there's a stake on the side of the river that says 15. So instead, it's a topographical map, and I'm having to line up natural features to what I'm seeing. And so, I'd be like, okay, I think if we're here, there should be 2 canyons on the right and a tributary on the left. And then there'd be 3 canyons on the right. And I'm like, shit, I have no idea where we are. And I was probably trying to struggle with that for almost an hour, just constantly trying to line up reality to my map somewhere within the range of where I thought we were. Until finally we saw some folks breaking down a campsite, and we knew that the campsites are kind of also labeled according to the river mile, so if we knew what camp they were at, we would know how far away we were. So we shouted over, and they shouted back that they were at Camp 4. So we weren't 15 miles away, we were 4 miles away, and we had plenty of hours to go, and at that moment, we threw down our paddles. Erica shoots this drugged out fist into the air. We eat something that's not this damn granola bar that we've been eating all night, because at that point we knew we were going to make it. And sure enough, we pulled into the beach. There was a whole crowd waiting for their scheduled boat. But as soon as they learned of our situation, news spread fast, and again, people had something for us. Someone cooked bacon for us, they made coffee. Someone set up a shade umbrella so that Erica could sit under the shade. It was a super sunny beach. And there was even a surgeon there who had this beefy first aid kit and volunteered to clean out her wound again, which was super nauseating to watch. But we got on the boat, we got her to the hospital. She ended up needing a lot of stitches, and she had a torn ACL, which explains the knee pain. So after that moment, we split up to our respective fall seasonal gigs, But every time I think of this trip and many trips since, the reason I go on these trips often is to connect more intentionally with myself or the people I'm going with, and explicitly not all the other people who are out there. The point is to get away. But in this situation, it was all those other people that made our evacuation safer, easier, smoother. And already I've been on another trip where I was approached in an evacuation for help. And I take great comfort knowing that that give and take will be a lifelong exchange among perfect strangers as long as we continue to recreate in these wild places. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess. Next up is Tell Us Something Storyteller alumni Joyce Gibbs. Joyce Gibbs is a resilient, creative, and adventurous woman who was raised in Missoula. Taught by her parents to leave it better than you found it, she bought a dilapidated railroad house on Missoula's north side and spent the next 15 years remodeling it and making it her own. Joyce loves being in nature, whether in shady parks in New Orleans, waterfalls in Hawaii, or the mountains around her home. Joyce has been a live drawing model for a variety of artists in Missoula for 20 years. When she is not busy building beautiful spaces with her tile installation at Joyce of Tile, you can find her riding her motorcycle, gardening, and going for neighborhood walks with her husband, Mark, and their kitten, Ziggy. Joyce is practicing the art of asking for what she needs and allowing the universe to bring it. Please welcome Joyce Gibbs.
On December 25th, 2019, I was at TSA in the Missoula International Airport. It was very early in the morning, and so Mark and I were the only people at TSA. We clocked in with the clerk at the front, and then we went to the conveyor belt where we took off our shoes and put our jackets down and put our backpacks down and took out the computer and then walked through the tunnel and assumed the position. And I walk out of the tunnel and the TSA officer says, "Is this your backpack?" And I say, "Yes, it's mine." This is my lucky backpack. I had had it for several years, and the best part so far of this backpack was the day that we had already gone through TSA, and the backpack contained a smell that had been ruminating in our house for several weeks. I couldn't find it. And we were at the gate of our plane, and I realized this smell is attached to me. So I'm digging through, I'm taking things out of the backpack, and I take out a box knife. I have already been through TSA, and I show it to Mark, and he says, "You should put that away." And I say, "Yes, I should." And put my hand into 3 rotten oranges. So thankfully, the rotten oranges went into the garbage, and I continued on that trip with my box knife. I actually made it through TSA again, and I still use that box knife every day. So I tell the TSA officer, "Yes, that is my backpack. Do you think you might have some bullets in here?" And I think, and I say, Well, yes, yeah, I probably do have bullets. They're probably in that little pocket on the belt that I didn't think to look in. And he opens up the pocket, and he pulls out 3 pieces of ammunition for a .338-06 Ackley improved hunting rifle. If you don't happen to know what a .338-06 Ackley improved is, it's okay, because my father built this gun. It is a beautiful gun. It's my hunting rifle. It also is something that you cannot buy in a store, which means he also built that ammunition, which is something you cannot buy in a store. He looks at me, the TSA officer, and he says, "I'm going to have to confiscate this." And I say, yes, please do. Yes, take it. Do your job. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to put my shoes on. I'm going to put my coat on. I'm going to go upstairs. We go upstairs, and there's my sister. I knew she would be there. My sister has come in on an early flight from Portland, and she is there to meet us, to say hi, to surprise later, to drive out to my parents' house and surprise them for a Christmas visit. So we get together at the gates there upstairs, and she gives me the things that Santa Claus left at her house for me, and I give her the things that Santa Claus left at my house for her, and we sit and have a little chat for a while because, we had gotten there 2.5 hours early. And as she's about to leave, I start thinking, and I'm like, okay, Mark, stay here with the baggage. I'm going to go with Nissa. And we walk out to TSA. And we walk to the clerk, and I say, earlier today, I got some bullets confiscated. I'm wondering if I could have those back. And the clerk says, I'm going to have to ask my manager. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And there's a couple people in TSA, so we wait about 5 minutes, and it's the same gentleman who confiscated my bullets. And I tell him, those are very precious bullets. Those are bullets for a gun that my father made, and he has to make all these bullets. And I don't know if you know about reloading ammunition, but it is a very long process. First, you have to fire a cartridge. You have to fire the ammunition so you can get the brass casing that the bullet comes in. And then you collect a whole bunch of those. And then you take out the primer from the brass casing, and then you tumble them in a rock tumbler to clean the brass of any residue that might be on them. And then you use calipers and very specifically find the measurements of the bullet to make sure that it will still be safe to, of the cartridge, to make sure it will be safe to once again pack with powder and put a new bullet in. And so then you can then again fire it, hopefully on a day that's not too hot or not too humid, because it might misfire if it was an extreme heat process. All these things, all this that my father has studied, that he has perfected as a science for the last 60 years. And the TSA officer looks at me and he says, well, those already went to the safety office. And I say, oh, okay. He says, well, you go down to baggage claim and you take a right and you go to a glass door and knock on the glass door. And so my sister and I go down to baggage claim, and there's a glass door. I promise, there's a glass door. You've never seen it. And you knock on the door. And this young woman comes out in her brown and tan sheriff's uniform with her pistol on her hip, and she looks at me and she looks at my sister, and she says, "Can I help you?" And I say, "This is my sister, and she's leaving to go to my parents' house. And you have some bullets that were confiscated from me that she might be able to take away to give to the person who actually made them today. And I'm going to go through TSA again, and I'll fly out of here if that's all right, if that's okay." And she looks at me, and she looks at my sister, and she says, and she goes to the desk, and she pulls out a number 10 tin coffee can, and she kind of sticks her hands in it and does this swirl, and there's lots of clinking, and it sounds like there's like 4 box knives in there, and she pulls out 3 bullets for a .338-06 Ackley improved. And she says, "Are these them?" And I say, "Yeah, that looks like them." And I step away, and she hands them to my sister, and I say, "Thank you." And she says, "Merry Christmas."
Thank you, Joyce. All right. Our next storyteller, first be aware that sensitive listeners, our next storyteller mentions sexuality. Lizzie Judah has been a proud parent of the west side of Missoula for nearly 33 years. She is founder and co-director of Turning the Wheel Missoula and has, for over 25 years, experienced teaching improvisational movement classes, expressive arts groups, and ceremonial rituals. She is passionate about providing opportunities for people of all ages and all abilities to play, move, and connect deeply with themselves and express their creative spark. She is an absolutely avid advocate for the accordion and alliteration artistry, and is a wannabe beat poet. She considers movement and touch her first languages and is finding her way with words. She identifies most with being a mojo-sprinkling pixie. Please welcome Lizzie Judah.
Thank you all for being here to support us and to listen to our stories. So I'm going to take advantage of this stone soup theme and tell you a bit about my journey through life using the kettle or the pot as a metaphor for myself. So I was born in the Midwest in the early 60s, and my pot was filled with Twinkies and canned spinach and 3 siblings and TV reruns and overly salted broth. And at the age of 8, my dad died, and my mom disappeared into her scotch bottle. And this left this pot of ours that we called family with a massive crack in it. And nobody was talking about this crack. Nobody was doing anything that I could tell that was trying to repair the damage that was being done. And so eventually, this kettle of ours crumbled around our feet. And I, being the sensitive, intuitive caretaker that I am, desperately tried to gather up all the shattered pieces and the scattered ingredients, and desperately tried to make some kind of magic brew or healing stew that would save us and that we could survive on. And obviously, this was impossible and exhausting. So I eventually left and came upon, at the age of 20, my former husband who, I wasn't gonna cry. My former husband who was this cast iron, stainless steel, nutrient-dense kind of man. And he was like solid and grounded and a Virgo. And he contained me and grounded me in a way I had never experienced before. I even wrapped a gold ring around myself for security and belonging. And I gladly just dumped my leaky, brothy, cracked, sad self into his kettle and merged all my ingredients with his ingredients, and we lived with this nutritious and delicious life for years and years, and we created 2 really amazing children and had this beautiful life together. And then around midlife, I would say, this grumbling and rumbling started quaking in my core to the point where I could not ignore it anymore. And I knew it was time for me to take my pot and see if I could cook something up on my own. I needed to figure out how to delineate what was my ingredients and what was all of the ingredients that were scattered around me. So I had been cooking in this one kitchen my entire adult life. And as I left, I brought with me this teeny little Bunsen burner and this flimsy little empty kettle, and wandered around for quite a while, dazed and disoriented, and there was another D word in there, dazed, disoriented, and devastated. And hungry as shit. And then I met this fiery powerhouse of a woman here in Missoula. And as we were getting to know each other, I started telling her that I was living on my own for the first time in my adult life. And I was trying to figure out, how do you do relationships where you can say what you need and you can receive support and don't get lost in the sauce? And she said, you need to check out this camp that is in Southern Oregon. I didn't totally know what she was talking about, but I could feel this flame under me growing in intensity, and I could feel water starting to swirl around inside my kettle again. She told me that this camp, Network for New Culture, is a place where people explore intimacy and personal growth and radical honesty and transparency. And I just knew at that moment that that was the next step in my evolution. So 2 weeks later, I'm in my car heading to Southern Oregon for the first time on a solo road trip since college. 2 long, hot, exhilarating days of driving, and I arrive at this place where I'm greeted by this beautiful man with a short lime green tutu and these antennae. and another man who's wearing nothing but a tool belt. And I'm like, girl, you might have wanted to read the fine print because I knew no one at this camp, and I was saying to myself, Lizzie, this looks like some wild-ass bouillon that you may or may not want to put in your pot. So I stood around the edges, and I'm a pretty open, progressive, earth mother, hippie chick kind of woman, but I stood around the edges of this camp like a wide-eyed coyote, checking out what the hell was going down. And I saw people picking up these handfuls of exotic herbs and spices and tossing them freely into their big old pots of stew. And then they were sharing their stew freely with all the other people. And they were receiving this amazing stew back. And they were nourished and they were fortified and they were... And I was sitting there going, I've put little sprinkles of salt in my broth. And I wanted a taste of what these people were putting down. So I have a minute left, and I have this much more of my story to tell you. So how am I going to shorten it? Okay, so I'm going to tell you this part of it. So one day I went down to the river, and I was hanging out with these people singing along the river, and the harmonies were incredible, and the sun was gorgeous, and people are dipping in and out of the river, laughing and telling stories and singing. And I got my courage up, and I took a big breath, and I stripped my clothes off, and I got into the river, and I could feel as I was standing there in front of people that I did not really know, I could feel this fear and this body shame and this sense of the cultural conditioning that I've carried around with me for my entire life just start to be carried down by the waves of the river, down to the ocean. And I've been back to this camp many, many times. And I've learned to expand my ability to give and receive love, and I've learned how to merge deeply with people and then come back home to my own kitchen where I am cooking up this spicy, organic, hearty, healthy, nutritious stew. And I'm here to share it with everyone. And I know that I am being fed by this much bigger love that flows through all things. And it flows through you too.
Thank you, Lizzie. This is not the story she told in the workshop. She worked hard, really. Give it up for Lizzie Judah, everybody. Brent Ruby is a research professor at the University of Montana and has been on a near... Yes, give it up for Brent Ruby. You don't even know what he's going to do yet. He has been on a near 30-year quest to do good science while also writing his own brand of ornery poetry during his relentless study of applied human physiology. One of Brent's research goals is to effectively share his research findings to improve the health and performance of wildland firefighters. Brent spends time outside of his research in the great outdoors of Montana with his wife Jo and their border collies Rango and Banjo. Brent also enjoys building hollow wood stand-up paddleboards, woodwork art, and writing children's books. Please welcome Brent Ruby.
I didn't know the dress code. So I have to start by saying, oh my frick, I'm standing on the stage of the Wilma Theater. Did anyone see John Prine sing here? Thank you, because the rest of my life, I can say, John Prine opened for me at the Wilma. So, a lot of people don't like road trips. And there's a reason for that. And that's okay if you don't. It's okay to admit it. Road trips force us to merge the things that are organized in our brains with the things that are unpredictable. And the things that are practical and predictable get tangled with the unknown. And that makes people uncomfortable. That's okay. So I'm about 60 miles south of Dillon, Montana, on Interstate 15. Great stretch of road. There's two camps when it comes to the philosophy of roadkill. The first camp is my wife and most of my coworkers are in this camp, and that is drive by that shit. I'm kind of in the other camp, which is if it's interesting, if it's feasible, if it hasn't been there a while, I'm stopping. So I pull around, get out of my big truck, and I'm standing in the sun, standing over a dead porcupine. And my scientific brain is calculating, it's about 11 o'clock in the morning. When did it die? How old is it? Because porcupines can live to be like 15 to 18 years old. So I kick at it a little bit, look around. There's no one coming. I'm taking this guy. So I grab it. But before I moved it, I realized, dead things smell. And this didn't smell that bad. I mean, Bed Bath & Beyond is not like saying, oh my gosh, this has got to be our next candle scent. But it wasn't that bad until I picked it up. And then the smell got into my mouth. No matter, I still took it. Put it in the truck, and I'm on my way down to Park City, Utah, where I was going to meet some colleagues for a multi-day meeting down there. So I get down to Park City, porcupine in tow, or in haul, and I meet up with my colleagues, and the first thing we do is go to the grocery store. And one of my colleagues says, okay, we need to just hodgepodge potluck stuff for dinner. So get whatever you want, and we'll put it together tonight. So I walk around the grocery store, still kind of smelling that porcupine. And all I came up with was some shitty Utah 3.2% alcohol grocery store beer and an enormous jar of dill pickles. That was my contribution. But I did tell my colleagues, I don't think we should eat the porcupine. So we end up going to our condo, Airbnb, whatever, and having our meetings for the next few days. Well, when we got there, I put the porcupine right in the freezer. And the pickles, I put the pickles right on the counter. And for the next 3 or 4 days, nobody touched either of them. So the pickles just sat on the counter, and I thought, well, okay, whatever. Well, it comes time for me to go. We'd separate. And I'm like, I'm taking my stuff. So I grab my giant jar of pickles. I mean, it's that big. It's big. Grab my giant jar of pickles and realize, oh, the porcupine. Can't leave that in the Airbnb freezer. Probably penalties. But I thought, I've sort of been with that thing. It's not fully salvageable. So I run next door to some fancy mountain bikers because it's Park City. And I say, guys, I need an axe. Oh, yeah, here you go. It's a pretty nice axe. And so I run back to the garage, 4 whacks, and I had my 4 paws. Ditched the rest of the porcupine in the garbage, salvaged the paws, and went into the kitchen and washed the axe off real good with soap and water, and went back to the guys and said, thank you so much for the axe. What'd you need it for? Porcupine salvage. No big deal. So anyways, I load up my stuff. I load up my paws, my claws, and my pickles into my truck. And I'm heading north on Interstate 15. And I'm about 60 miles south of Dillon again. It is just after a thunderstorm. That kind of after a thunderstorm where the sun is so bright on the pavement and the rain is just evaporating off of that pavement so you can just feel it and see it leave the earth. That rain, that same rain, was thick on the sage in those prairies. So thick that sage smell was sneaking its way into the cab of the pickup truck, and it was awesome. I wish I had my sunglasses, but they were packed away with my paws and my claws. That's when I saw her. That's when I saw her, and that's when I saw her thumb. There's 2 camps when it comes to picking up hitchhikers. Those that my wife and most of my coworkers are in, and damn it, I just made eye contact with her. I have to stop. I have to. So I pulled over, backed up, I get out of my truck. Right then, she swings this big old backpack off of her shoulders, and I look at her, and her shirt was stained with earth and strain and pain. And I said, oh my gosh, what can I help you? You need help. And she says, if you could give me a ride to Lima, I would love it. I'm like, yeah, get in. I'll grab your pack. So she gets in the truck. I grabbed her pack. I'm like, whoa, damn. I said, girl, I only picked up 1 porcupine. How many you got in this backpack? Threw it in the back of my truck, got in the truck. And when I got in the truck, when both doors closed, there was the smell of human sweat, earth, a bit of wet dog. It was so bad that I wished I had the porcupine in the back seat of the truck. And she sticks her dirty hand out and says, I'm Birdie. Thanks so much for helping me. And she says, I don't think I smell very good. And I said, no shit. And I said, Birdie, what are you doing? And I said, how can I help you? And she says, I've been foodless for 2 days. I got chased by a grizzly bear, lightning storm, bad rain, and then I saw your truck. And it was my hope to get out of this mess. And so I rambled up to the highway to get my thumb up in the air. And I said, I'm so happy to help you. I've got food. What can I do? And she goes, I just got to get to the grocery store in Lima. And I said, well, what's tomorrow? What's your plan? And she says, tomorrow I'm coming right back here. I'm jumping back on the Continental Divide Trail. I got to finish this thing. She was hiking it solo. So I said, well, I can get you to Lima, but I don't know how you're going to resupply. And she goes, I need to get to a grocery store. I said, Birdie, there is no grocery store in Lima. And she got silent. I said, I have all the food you need. I got plenty of food. And she goes, it's not that. The tears rolled down her dirty face and carved what looked like topo lines from a map down her dirty cheeks. And she said, food is not what I need. I have a ridiculous craving, and have for the last 2 days, for pickles. You're taking up my time. At that moment, whatever was playing on the radio went silent. All of the angels from all of the people in Beaverhead County that had ever been hungry, tired, or perished on the prairie locked their wings in position. As I fumbled to reach over the seat to grab my giant-ass bottle of pickles, I struggle over and get it onto the console, and Birdie's eyes were as big as the lid on that jar of pickles. And the tears came back, following that same map, just ending up in a giant smile at the end of her face. I pulled into Lima, we got out of the truck, standing in the gravel, and she insisted that we have a toast. She let me pick the first pickle out of the jar, which was good because her hands were filthy. So we had a pickle toast in the Lima parking lot, in the gravel, and we shared hugs, smiles, little tears, and I jumped back in the truck. I started to drive away, and I caught Birdie in the back rearview mirror of my truck. She was clutching that big-ass jar of pickles and just kind of dragging her backpack along as dead weight. And I queued up the John Prine. So, what is the plan? What indeed is the plan? A little dirty birdie told me that there is no plan. All we have to do is add our own special ingredients.
Thank you, Brent. Ruby. And thank you to all of our storytellers so far tonight. Thank you especially to you all for being here to support them. Thank you to our American Sign Language interpreters, Badi Curran and Denise May. Thank you to our title sponsors, Blackfoot Communications. And thank you to all of our in-kind sponsors, Joyce of Tile, specializing in custom tile installations. Missoula Broadcasting Company, including the family of ESPN Radio, The Trail 103.3, Jack FM, and my favorite place to find a dance party while driving. Hi, Aubrey, I know you're here. U104.5 FM. Gecko Designs, the designers of the Tell Us Something website. Find them at geckodesigns.com. Oh, I meant to say Joyce's website, joyceoftile.com. Float Missoula, learn more at floatmsla.com. True Food Missoula, I drive for them on Wednesdays. Order your food on Friday, get it by Wednesday. It's the amazing, amazing food. True Food Missoula, truefoodcsa.com for that. Farm to table stuff, they're good. Check them out at truefoodcsa.com and missoulaevents.net. When you frequent these businesses, thank them for their support of Tell Us Something and let them know you appreciate what they do for us. And we're about to have an intermission. But before we do that, I want to just let you know the next Tell Us Something event was scheduled. I just booked it at the Bonner Park Bandshell for June 27th. We did a show there in August last year and learned a lot. We're hiring Attack and Release Sound to help us out. And I'm so stoked. The theme is Didn't See That Coming. So if you have a didn't see that coming story, you can go to tellussomething.org and click Tell a Story, and you'll get all the details there. So we're going to have an intermission, and after intermission, we're going to have the audience participation part of the evening, and then continue with our storytellers. So enjoy your intermission, 10 minutes, grab a drink, tip your bartenders, thank you staff at Logjam Presents, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Jason? Thank you. Welcome back from intermission. Some of you who have been here before probably remember Lauren Champa. She's our audience participation person, and meet Jason Sloat. He's a board member, and he's going to help out today. So we've got about 5 minutes for audience participation, and then we'll come back to the main program. Thank you so much.
All right, our first anonymous audience participation story. This is a short one. A really kind stranger gave me his extra ticket so I could come to this show. Met him randomly outside of this theater. Talk about community coming together. Thanks, man.
Hello. I just want to take a second to thank Mark and Joyce for this event, because I personally feel like after 2 years of not having this, it feels really good to be in a room with all of you. So. I was there to replace her light fixture. She said, "Yell if you need anything." I yelled, "I need a girlfriend." Later we talked. I would build her mother a railing, and she would teach me to drive a boat on the ocean. Ask and you will receive.
This is one of my favorite stories. When my daughter was in preschool in Anchorage, Alaska, she was able to make a stone soup, which in my mind was part of the legacy of cooking in my family. The idea of making food for others out of the earth is a beautiful thing.
When I was 14, my cousin died. He discovered he had cancer at 23, and 6 months later, he was gone. My 3 sisters and I came to Missoula with our parents to say goodbye, and we spent the last week of his life with friends as the adults managed his pain. We had to walk past his coffin in the garage every time we went to visit, as the friend was a carpenter. When we said goodbye for the last time, my mom said, "Don't say goodbye, say see you later." I felt uncomfortable with all the adults watching us, and his Blackfeet friend said a protective prayer with feathers that drew even more attention to my awkward teenage self. I hugged my bald, brave, formerly strong cousin, told him I loved him, and said goodbye.
We were traveling by bus from Guatemala to Veracruz, Mexico. The trip should have taken 4 days, but it took an extra 2 days after the bus hit someone in Belize. All 20 passengers got out to help. We stopped traffic, got help, and performed life-saving measures. Once the injured person was taken to the clinic by a passing driver, the rest of us were delayed 2 more days for repairs to the bus. We set up a tent community, cooked food, played music, and told stories until we could get back on the bus.
Something from nothing. The something, the aha moment when I thought that I was living my dead uncle's spirit. In me, through me, navigating my eternal mysteries landscape, looking into with wonder and unknown. What light, what truth within me that I can share, in love and with love for him, my uncle, whom I've never met.
My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Linnaberry, taught my class the value of sharing through having us literally make stone soup on the playground over an open fire. That probably was not to code at the time. Little did she know she would spark a love of cooking in me that would last a lifetime, not to mention my eating habit. I love food, the alchemy of cooking, the act of bringing people together, to break bread, to share stories, to be a community. I now own Bernice's Bakery and have made a life and a career out of feeding people.
I am 50 years old, and this is the year that I've learned of my worth, of my place at the table. I was told by my family, my culture, that I was too much, too feeling, too sensitive, too many questions, too curious, too concerned about the vulnerable, about the creatures that others villainize, and so I hid. I put my head down. I didn't ask. I buried my talents, my me, to soothe others, for others. Then my body made me choose between pain and righteousness, and I chose the latter out of survival. I am imperfect. I am a learner. I am a lover. I am safe. I am perfect. I am imperfect. I am you. You are me. We are we. And there is room for all.
Thank you all who shared your stories. Thank you all who shared your stories, and thank you, Lauren and Jason, for sharing them with us. How's everybody feeling tonight? That's what I like to hear. Rachel Bemis marks her 20th year in Montana. She is a 4th grade teacher in the Bitterroot Valley, where a third of her students tower over her. I'll have to adjust this. She shares her home with her best friend of 21 years and her 5-year-old St. Bernard, and I hope I get this right, Lorelei. I like that. She spends her free time binging Gilmore Girls, the Great British Baking Show, 90 Day Fiancé, or any trashy reality show, really, that she can stomach. You can find her getting vegan pizza takeout, walking with friends at the library, or punctuation matters, or at her favorite consignment shop. She loves discussing any book except for science fiction with her monthly book club. Please welcome Rachel Bemis.
I used a comma, just to clarify.
Is that enough?
Yeah. It was the summer of 2007. I was 27 years old, living in Missoula. I worked as a real estate lender and also served on a nonprofit board. And I had a dirty little secret. I loved reality shows, and my standards were very low. Flavor of Love, Rock of Love, Project Runway, we're getting up there. Top Chef, a little better. But after a long day, I absolutely loved watching a good show. And reality stars became the new celebrities of our time. I had an upcoming trip planned. I had a work conference in Washington, D.C. And I had traveled, before, but I had never spent any time on the East Coast. And I decided if I was going to be there for work for a week, I might as well add New York to the list. Why not spend a few days in New York City, checking out all of the sites? But the number one thing that was on my list is I wanted to meet a celebrity. And when I say celebrity, I mean a reality star. So the trip was planned, the tickets were purchased. Of course, I was going to go see the Lincoln Monument. Big priority. I was certainly going to see the things that my mom told me I needed to see. Purchase the tickets, but of course, I also wanted to see a reality star. So like many of my trips, one of my weekly phone calls was to my wonderful grandfather, Papa. Papa was 77 years old. We were 50 years and 4 days apart. He lived in Sacramento, California. He loved hearing about my adventures. So I gave him a call, let him know what my plans were. I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. I'm going to jump on the Greyhound bus. I'm going to spend 3 days in New York. And this was my plan. Okay, great, super supportive, great. I felt very confident traveling on my own. A couple days after I got off the phone with Papa, Papa gave me a call and said, I just want to let you know that I spoke with Ruth. Ruth was his wife of 6 years, not my grandmother. They were having some marital problems. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that I told Ruth about your trip, and I let her know that your travel companion canceled. And that you didn't feel comfortable traveling alone. And that I'm going to fly to New York to be with you. And again, he lives in Sacramento, California, and I live in Missoula, Montana. And I said, okay, well, you're more than welcome, Papa, but you do know that I never had a travel companion. I feel completely comfortable, confident, traveling on my own. And he said, Rachel, I need a break. Okay. I will meet you in New York City. So the trip is becoming very different. So first of all, I definitely checked some things off the bucket list. Spent the week in Washington, D.C., learned a lot, did the work conferences, did the sightseeing, did all of the things my mom told me I should do. Then I went to Art and Soul, which is Art Smith, Oprah's personal chef. I went to his new restaurant. I saw Spike from season 1, or his restaurant, Top Chef, his burger joint. But I still had not seen a celebrity. So this is very much on my mind. And of course, I knew I was going to New York, but a very different trip than I had planned as a 27-year-old solo traveler. Now my elderly grandfather is coming with me. I get on the Greyhound bus on Friday afternoon from Washington, D.C. to New York. Of course, I had that trip planned as well. That's who I am. I was going to be staying, or we were going to be staying at my cousin's apartment in Harlem that my mom arranged. I've never met him. And he wasn't going to be staying there. So I had the whole trip planned, very excited. So I get to New York City. My grandfather has been traveling all day. Of course, I've been in a conference all day, and now I'm on the bus. And I arrived to see my 77-year-old grandfather, who loved every shade of green, and he wore them all at once. He was never too full for ice cream, and he had beautiful salt and pepper hair. We arrived and were exhausted. So we immediately went to the apartment in Harlem, which was great. It's vibrant. We're excited. We're these country bumpkins. He's from the suburbs. I'm in quiet, sleepy Missoula. I'm in the big city, and I'm going to see a celebrity. I'm used to the magazines. You know, photographers are getting people walking out of restaurants with their dogs or, you know, something. I'm definitely going to see somebody. That was my focus. Of course, I'm enjoying my time, seeing the sights, but that was my focus. Spent the night in Harlem, wake up the next morning. How did you sleep, Papa? Terrible. We both slept horrible. It was loud. We weren't used to it. It was great. It was vibrant. It was the city, but we were tired. Well, we had to push through. We only had 3 days. So, of course, we had everything, or I had everything planned. And we went on a boat tour, exhausted, pushed through. We said, we have got to go see a show. We're in New York City. It's sweltering. It's 95 degrees. It would be really nice to go see a show and just sit in the air conditioning for a few hours. So he said, let's see Phantom of the Opera. Okay. So we walk in, air conditioning. We sit down. And we woke up 3 hours later. We slept through the entire thing. And I don't mean that peaceful, you know, with our head down on each other's shoulders. I mean, you know, waking up, snorting, you know, did anybody hear me? Did anybody see, you know, head nodding, uncontrollably embarrassed? And I'm still like, okay, we slept through it. It's fine. We laughed about it for years. It was the best nap we've ever had. It was the most expensive nap we've ever had. And I was like, okay, maybe this is the time. I'm going to see a celebrity. Someone's going to come to a matinee in the summer, right? No, Nothing. Okay, fine. Continue on with the trip. We are walking Central Park. Not that big, by the way, if you haven't been there. Thought it was huge. It's not. Times Square, not that big. Super shocked. But it was great. We had a wonderful, wonderful time. Still looking for that reality star. So through our marital conversations and Papa's venting and me trying to give advice to my 77-year-old grandfather about marriage when I'm not married, we decide on our last day we're going to go on one of those touristy bus tours where you drive by all of the sites. We drive by Serendipity with the hot chocolate. We go by where the Macy's Parade is, Rockefeller Center, all these great things. So first of all, we get onto the bus. Again, air conditioning was our best friend at this point. It was so hot. And he's 77. He needs a break. He needs to sit down. We enter the bus. The air conditioning just blows on us. I sit on the window, and he sits to the right of me with an aisle. The bus was fairly empty, which was kind of nice. I could comment on the, oh my gosh, Serendipity, we should go there for hot chocolate. You know, all of the things without worrying about other people judging or listening to our stories. So as we're going along, we're enjoying our time, pointing to different things. And the bus is moving, and then I see him. Walking the opposite direction of the bus, I see this platinum blonde hair. I knew immediately who it was. Okay, so pause. So it's season 1 of Top Chef. Okay? And there's this feisty platinum blonde chef named Dave. And he is cooking with this fiery ginger redhead named Tiffany. And she is assertive, not bossy. I don't like that word because I relate to it very much. She is fierce, and she is assertive, and he doesn't like it, okay? And he says something to her. Mind you, this is racing through my brain as I see the platinum blonde. This is like 2 seconds of my life, okay? I don't really remember his name, don't really remember how I know him, but I remembered what he said to her. Without a beat, I'm on the bus, and I start panicking. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I'm not your bitch, bitch. I'm not your bitch, bitch. I'm screaming this on the bus with my 77-year-old grandfather next to me, okay? Why I didn't yell Dave, don't know. Why I didn't yell Top Chef, don't know. Big fan, I have no idea. I just start screaming. Luckily, the window was up, and I look to my right to explain why I have this outburst, and my grandfather is asleep. I had my grandfather for 13 more years. We shared many trips together, road trips, many memories, and I lost him in 2020. And that is the trip I'll never forget. That was the time that I screamed at a reality star in a bus, and my grandfather slept through the whole thing.
Thank you, Rachel. Our next storyteller. Darius Janczewski is an author, graphic designer, runner, and a refugee who arrived in the United States in 1984 and in Missoula in 1989. Darius deserted from the Polish Communist Army in 1984 when he represented his country as a runner in Italy. He was preparing for the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics when he decided to defect, not knowing that the Olympiad would be boycotted by most of the communist countries, including Poland. Darius shares his life with his wife, Katie, and their grand peonies, Cordelia. Darius is a published author and is currently working on his collection of short stories titled Minotaur or The Art of Running. Please welcome Darius Janczewski.
Hello, good evening. I want to apologize to Denise, making her work harder. Since we're kids, children, we're always told to finish what we started. But I'm here to tell you something else. Don't worry about finishing what you started. Start something. It's about starting. I love movies, and you might be surprised to tell you I have many favorite movies, but I often don't finish watching them. Not because they're bad movies, but and sometimes they have terrible endings, but I just enjoy the departure, the beginning of the movies. That's what I watch. One of my favorites recently is Shackleton. It was Kenneth Branagh, a BBC production. You might be familiar with the endurance story, but if you're not, I will just summarize it quickly. That it's about a British explorer, Ernest Shackleton, who is attempting to cross Antarctic on foot, just with dogs. They're supposed to get to Antarctic, get to the South Pole, and then continue to the other side of the continent, and then be picked up by another ship. And some of you might know that never happens. He is stranded near the Antarctic. After a few months of drifting, his ship is crushed by the ice and sinks. His crew survives. They take 3 boats, safety boats, and then get to safety. It's one of the best survival story ever. And some of you might know that they just found the ship recently after 106 years of searching for it. How many of you are runners? Yeah. I can't see you anyway. I used to be a very, very, very good runner. I used to run sub 4-minute mile, and I represented my country. Thank you. But what I remember from my best races is the beginning, the start, not the finish or the medals, ceremonies and stuff. I remember starting. I remember the first starter gun, taking off, seeing the muscular bodies of my friends in front of me. I was not that good, Sweaty backs, their hair running, their arms working. That's what I remember most from my best races, not the finish. Yeah. Because it's all about departures, not about destinations. So one of my best stories about departures is my defection. I was a deserter. The difference between desertion and defection is slight. The deserter, if he comes back or she comes back, he's gonna go to long-time jail or even under the wall and be executed. That's the difference. And defectors usually leave because of politics or religion or hardship. So when I defected in 1984 in Italy, I don't remember worrying about consequences of my defection or desertion. I don't remember worrying about my family or my friends or seeing my country. I do remember saying goodbye to my mother, but she didn't know I was leaving anyway for good. She knew I was just leaving to another competition. But what I remember the most from my defection is in Italy. When I was in Italy, I remember leaving. I remember taking my bag, my shoes, 4 o'clock in the morning, making sure everybody is asleep, coaches and my teammates, and tiptoeing from the room down the hallway and leaving the hotel. And I remember I scouted where the train station was the day before, so I knew where it was. I had my pocket money enough to get the tickets to the city that I heard refugee camp was in. And so I got on the train, had about 10 minutes to go, and I was thinking, hopefully nobody woke up and find out I'm not there. But no, I was fine. The train took off. I remember opening the windows, seeing the countryside, Mediterranean, Italy, beautiful Italy, smelling the sea. The Italians laughing, very friendly. Long story short, I got to the refugee camp, and then I forgot to tell you one important reason why I defected. I defected because I fell in love with somebody who left for America, and I decided to follow her. Wait. It's not the end of the story. But so, long story short, I went to refugee camp, then I came to America, and I found out that the love was not there anymore. There was no love anymore. And so, it's all about departures. Well, let's get back to the current issues. I'm thinking about Ukraine, of course, and the soldiers who are sitting around the campfire having a very small meal and thinking and hearing the explosions. And I'm thinking the war will be over one day. I'm sure they will be over one day. All the wars end one day. And I'm wondering, what will the soldiers remember from this war? Will they remember the explosions, the killing, the violence? No, I don't think so. I think they will remember saying goodbye, the departure. And I also think their families will remember it too. Anyway, I'm going to quit it here and say, please remember, it's about departures, okay? Not about destinations. Thank you.
Thank you, Darius. Our next storyteller is a Tell Us Something alumni. Katrina Farnum is a local dirt-loving herbalist, mother, and educator. She is the developer and owner of Garden Mother, a holistic herb shop and dispensary with locations in Missoula and Kalispell. No product placement here. Katrina is passionate about healthy food, community, continual self-improvement. She spends much of her time creating and engineering things to help others live better lives. Her spirit animal is the Incredible Hulk, and her alter ego is a mixture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Butch Cassidy, played by Paul Newman. Please welcome Katrina Farnum.
Joyce said you don't like it if people hold the microphone, so I won't do it. She said that people pace, but I love pacing when I talk. It's a thing. So if there are two kinds of people when it comes to roadkill, There are definitely two kinds of people when it comes to filling up your car with gasoline. There are some of us that, or you, that let it get halfway down and you pull into the gas station and you fill your car back up. And there are other of us that let it run all the way out. Thank you. Glad we have a group. And then we fill it back up. So yes, this is a story of me running out of gas in my car. And I am gonna just avoid telling you how many times in my life that I have run out of gas in my car. And there are probably some psychologists in the room that are evaluating me right now. And you probably have good reason because I've actually never run out of gas in winter, not one time. And Mr. Nichols, if you are by chance in the audience tonight, this is not the time that I ran out of gas on Brook Street, but I did make it to the title company in time to sign papers. Thank you very much for that, to give me a ride. No, this is the time that I ran out of gas on Reserve Street, the other awesome street in Missoula to run out of gas on. And I was southbound, heading down Reserve Street, so Costco is approaching on my left, and I don't know, sorry for not giving you the shout out, whatever the box store is on the other side. And to be fair here, the car that I was driving at the time had a faulty tire, gauge sensor for the air thingy, whatever you go ahead, mechanics in the room. And it would do this bing, bing, bing. And like any good parent, you just learn how to block out certain sounds, which I did. And it's the same sound for the gas. So I'm driving, it binging, I'm not listening, I'm busy, right? I got stuff to do, I got places to be. And all of a sudden, that's it. There's no more fuel, and I'm coming to a stop, at the worst spot. And if I had just been 15 or 20 feet further, I could have just scooted into the turn lane, and I would have been far enough back in it that people could have still gotten around me, and I would have been out of the way of traffic. But that's not happening. And it was a shoulder season like it is right now. So you've got chunks of snow and it's gritty and it's starting to melt and kind of run down in these little puddles. And I just spring to. I'm like, holy shit, I need to get a gas can right now. And as I'm getting out of the car to do this, there are literally people who are basically doing the get a room, but whatever the equivalent of car running out of gas that you say to people. And so I run into Costco because it's the closest place. And I do this thing and I run to the service counter. I'm like, hey, do you guys sell gas cans here? And she's like, no, we do not sell gas cans here. And then I'm like, okay. And so I run across the street, right, in Lowe's. And I get into Lowe's, and of all the dumb luck, I know they sell gas cans there, but not this day. They're out of gas cans. I'm like, oh my God, how long is my car sitting in traffic? And I run, I'm thinking Costco has a service center, right? They have to have a gas can in there. And I run as fast as I can, and I bust through the door of the service center. And there's a couple guys working, there's a guy at the little kiosk-y, whatever, and I say, okay, so my car is really right out there, it's not very far, and stranded, I really need a gas can, and whatever you guys have, you have an empty one, I can just fill it up. And have you ever had that thing happen when you are in a hurry or a really big hurry, and then the person or the people you're dealing with are definitely not in a hurry? And so the guy takes a sip of his coffee, and he thinks about it, and he sets it down, and I could feel myself coming out of my skin a little bit. And he saunters over to this cabinet, and it's big and it's kind of rusty, and he opens the drawers, and inside is this weird smattering of gas cans and whatever else is in there. And he might be saying something, but it's the adrenaline maybe has tuned him out, and it's become this the Charlie Brown teacher. And so he's wah, 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 wah. And I'm gas cans, yes, we're talking a language. I don't know what you're saying, but give me a gas can. And the guy's reluctant, and he pulls out one that's kind of old, the good style, right, the kind we like. And he kind of shakes it, and it's half full of fuel. And he's well, yeah, all right, I think it's probably good fuel. And he hands it to me, and I'll run back to my car as fast as I can. Now, normally when you run out of gas, you would hopefully be on the shoulder, but I'm not. So I'm in traffic, right? My body, I'm like trying to suck it up against my car as much as I can. And I realized that the spout for this old gas can is really short. So it doesn't quite get far enough down there that it's pushing the little tab aside, and there's like fuel getting kind of in, but mostly out, and it's running down the car and splashing on my feet, and it is mixing with the gross stuff on the road, and I am feeling like just happy if I get enough in there. And then I had like a little hoodie on it, and in my pocket, I had this little leather pouch that was my wallet, and it's got all the cards, and it drops out of my pocket, and it lands in the puddle with the gasoline and all the awesome. So I huck it inside my car, and I'm like, all right, I think there's enough fuel in here. So I just jump in my car, throw the gas can in there, and I try to start it. And definitely bad fuel. So I'm like, all right, what am I gonna do? And I go to get out of my car. I'm gonna bring the gas can back and figure out I could probably dump it out or whatnot. And this guy pulls up. He had like parked his truck off the way, and he said, how can I help you? And I'm like, well, yeah, let's push it. And my thought is, we're just gonna push it far enough into that turn lane where I'd wanted to be in the first place, where people can still get around me so they can turn. And as we're going, I can see we have two different ideas. And we're pushing, and it's a little bit of a hill, so we're picking up speed, and we're approaching the intersection. And the guy yells at me, go, go, go! And I look, and I mean, there's 4 lanes of traffic, and coming at us is a semi-truck. And you know, I'm not a professional gap reader, but I have done a lot of mountain biking and boating and snowmobiling and snowboarding that I think I have a decent perception when it comes to like speed and timing and distance. And I know we are not making that gap. And I yell back to him, no, no, no! And I jump inside the car and I have to jack my foot on the brake, and we are in the dead middle of the intersection. Now, there is definitely not any part of me that is having that, because I've already just been over there behind this space that was inconvenient. This one is way less convenient. And I can see like this moment happening where I can see, okay, semi's gonna pass, there are 3 cars, there's a gap, it's not huge, we can make it. I don't know this guy, but we're about to build a trusting relationship together. And I say to him, okay, bud, are you ready? We're gonna push and go. And we're pushing, 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 and we get through this intersection. And you don't actually know if a road has any sort of incline at all until you're pushing a dead car. And then like an inch is more, it's like measured in feet. So you don't know if you've ever turned, you're gonna check next time. But when you go into Costco, like there's a slight incline right there. And so we just came to a peaceful stop. And the guy's like, what else can I do? And I'm like, nothing, dude, thank you so much. This is great, you've been huge help. And I like grab the yucky gas can, I'll run it back over to Costco. I'm like, do you have can I just dump the fuel out of this can somewhere? And I got this big talking to about the EPA, and you can't just dump gas out. And I'm like, you definitely did not just see what happened on the side of the road. But okay, so here's your can back. I shouldn't have asked. And the guy working there says, hey, I drove my daughter's car to work today, and in the back seat, she has a gas can. So he walks me out across the parking lot, probably again slower than I would have normally walked by myself. And we get the gas can, and I'm like, thanks, and it's like empty, but I unscrew it, and I look inside the gas can, and there's like just this little teeny eensy bit of fuel in there, but like lots of dead flies. And I cannot confirm nor deny what happened to said fuel or flies, but it was empty when I got to the pumps. So I walk up there, and I realize like my yucky wallet I had thrown in the back seat is still in the back seat, and I'm standing at the gas pump, and this guy is just finishing fuel, and he's like, hey, put your gas can over here, and I'll fill it up for you. He doesn't know I don't even have a wallet. He's just being a nice guy. And so he fills it up, and I go over and I put gas in my car. I'm feeling pretty good because now I'm in home stretch. But you know I had to deal with that shitty new gas can, which even though it's long enough to reach a little push tab, and so half the time you're fighting with that thing, but it works out. And I pull in, and I fill my car up with gas, and I'm like, at that moment where I'm like, all right, I have no idea what I was probably doing something important before this huge saga. And right as I'm like done, I'm wrapping up, I'm ready to leave, and I see the guys who had pulled in behind me, and he's at the pumps, and he's doing the pat down. And then he gets inside of his rig, and his little legs are kind of out while he's reaching across the seat. And he gets back out, and I see the pat down, and I'm like, oh, you don't have a wallet. And it's rare that you get to pay it forward so quickly. Like a lot of times you do a good deed, or someone does a good deed, and it just, it's like into the ether for a while. And I just said, hey, man, pull your car up here, and I'm going to throw fuel in it for you. And he's missed, like, the whole awesome thing that just happened. He just thinks I'm being nice. For all I know, the guy who did that for me with the gas can just went through what I did. So there I am. I'm able to fill him up, and I'm off.
Thank you, Katrina. Okay, so that's our 7 storytellers, and here's the thing. I told you there would be some surprises, and some of them have already happened. You might not have noticed. So I send out surveys to the email list, and some people open them, and some people fill them out. And one of the things that I asked in 2019 on the survey was, what would you like to see us do to celebrate Tell Us Something's 10-year anniversary? And one of the things was, bring back some storyteller alumni to tell a different story. So Katrina's an alumni. She told a different story. Joyce is an alumni. She told a different story. But one of the other suggestions was, bring back storytellers to tell the same story and see what that's like. See how different it is. So that's what we're about to see. This is the other surprise. So, all of that being said, you're going to get a survey. I don't know how it's going to be delivered. It might come from Tell Us Something. It might come from somewhere else. If you get it, please open it and tell us how we did tonight. Tell us what you'd like to see done differently. I already had somebody say, ditch your phone. Which I like. I want to hear that sort of stuff. Watch me wing it. I don't know if I could pull it off. I'm not an actor, so I can't memorize stuff, and I would never remember people's bios. So here it goes, Jeff Ducklow's bio. He is no stranger to adventure. Jeff Ducklow has a Portuguese blood, and it courses through his vein, and he inherited all of the wanderlust of his Mediterranean forebears. However, unfortunately, without the accompanying and essential navigation acumen. Despite this, Jeff spent his time as a professional adventure guide, guiding men, women, and children oblivious to his affliction of not having good direction, on hikes over mountain passes, rafting down raging rivers, and leading sea kayaking adventures in Alaska and whale-infested waters. He is often quoted as saying, "Is it really an adventure if getting back is a certainty?" Having almost died unnecessarily on numerous occasions, Jeff Ducklow is now a full-time massage therapist in Missoula who rides his unicycle to work in order to keep an element of danger in his life. He still loves the outdoors and enjoys recounting his exploits to anyone willing to listen. Please welcome Jeff Ducklow.
Thank you. Whew. It's times like this when I wish I had prepared something. Even though I believe that the only thing worse than public humiliation is voluntarily doing it to yourself, I feel compelled to tell you my story. For years, I thought my inner compass was damaged until I finally realized I didn't have one. What possessed me to become an adventure guide is still confusing. It's sort of like a teacher of a second language teaching without actually knowing a second language. I've been lost in the Andes. I have been lost in the Sierra Nevadas. I have been lost in the Alaskan wilderness. I've been displaced in the Bitterroots. And I've been completely lost in many a mall's parking lot. So I don't know why I thought a jungle on an island in the middle of the Pacific would be any different. It was supposed to be a simple journey from point A to point B. But I got deep into the alphabet this day, my friends. So a few years back, I went to the beautiful Hawaiian island of Kauai with my then girlfriend, who incidentally I lost. I mean, she knows where she is. We'd gone to a wedding of one of her friends. Wedding was over, and she went back home. She had to work. I was in between seasons and stayed a few extra days. And so I did the typical touristy things. I laid on the beach, played in the surf, had a few mojitos, and then I decided I need to kick the adventure level up a few notches. So I found a Hawaiian guy on the beach, and I said, hey, if you only had 3 days left on this beautiful island, what would you do? And without hesitation, he said, Lost Trail, man. Lost Trail, that sounds really hard to find. He said, no problem, I'm gonna draw you a map. And he sketched out a little map of dirt roads with no names and said, you'll see a small break in the jungle. And if you walk down the trail and you find a little footbridge, that's not it. Go back and find another break in the jungle. And that's exactly what happened. So I got going the next day in the morning. Actually, it was the afternoon, about 3 o'clock. And I got in my rental car and started going down the roads. And it was about an hour and a half drive down these unnamed roads. And sure enough, I found a small break in the jungle. And I thought, this has to be it because I don't see anything else. So I got out, sun's getting a little lower, and I packed a few essentials in my backpack and I took off. And it's supposed to be a loop, this little journey. A couple miles in, I got to an amazing place along Waimea Canyon, which is spectacular. It's 10 miles long, 3,000 feet deep, waterfalls everywhere. The lava has turned red over time. Spectacular. I walked out on this little strip of land that went out into the canyon, sheer drops on each side. Spectacular, amazing. I took some pictures, and that should have been enough. But I wanted more. With the sun hanging even lower, I took off down the trail. And it was maybe a mile, and I thought, I can do this. And then I came to a branch in the trail. And I took out my map, and I'm looking at it. There's no branch. And I start rotating it. And you know when you start doing that with a map, you should go back. But I stood, and I looked down one path and then another, and I thought of Robert Frost, who once stood in the yellow wood and could not travel both. And he took the one less traveled by, and that made all the difference. I'm here to tell you, it really does make a big difference. So I choose a path that looks actually a little more traveled, and it quickly becomes the trail that has probably never been taken. And I end up on a rock chute, probably 1,500 feet down. Really loose boulders, and I know it's a bad idea, but I see that the trail looks like it continues over there. So I really carefully start going across, and I get to the middle, and I think, this is stupid. That doesn't always stop me, but I had the thought, I should go back. And then I looked at what I had just traversed, said, no way, I am not doing that again. And I'm not going that way either. So I decided to go up, clinging to the mountain like Velcro hands. And I got to the top, and then I see the jungle again, and there's little yellow ribbon hanging from some trees, and I thought, eureka, trail markers. So I entered the jungle, which is quite a bit darker, and I'm looking around, and I see these little yellow markers are everywhere. I don't know what the hell's going on. And I see maybe 1,000 feet away what could be a trail, but it's super steep embankment, and I start going down, and it's ridiculously steep, and I said, no way. And so by the time I got to the top, it was dark. I was screwed. I was spending the night in the jungle. So I took a quick inventory of what I had. I reached into the backpack, and I had an empty Nalgene bottle, which I quickly began to fill with my urine. I had read this somewhere. You can recycle and reuse. So I did what I could with the bottle, and then I also saw I had a 2012 flip phone who had a notoriously short battery life. So in the dark, I started crawling around because, of course, there's cell coverage in the jungle. There didn't seem to be any, but miraculously, I found a 1-inch by 1-inch parcel that had 1 bar. So, of course, I called my girlfriend and not 911. And I said, I got on this trail called Lost Trail. I'm not sure how to tell you how I got there. I'm not sure how to get back. I believe I'm spending the night in the jungle. And then she said, if you're happy with this message, please press 1. So I hung up the phone and braced myself for a rough night. The thing is, I'd heard plenty of stories of the Hawaiian jungle, that it ran feral with wild boar. That's what was on my mind. They had tusks so sharp they could tear a man to 2 in seconds. So I sat there on the ground pretty concerned, and I don't know how long it was, maybe 2 hours. I heard branches starting to snap from the hill above me, and it was getting closer and louder. And I sprung up with a burst of adrenaline, and by the beard of Zeus, I got about 10 feet up into the tree for about 10 seconds until the branch broke. I ended up on the canopy floor again, and now with only half as much adrenaline, I got about 4 feet off the ground. And I sat on this branch for hours, not wanting any boar contact. But my ass got so sore, I didn't care about getting bored. I got back down on the ground, fearing also what I were told were centipedes as long as a man's boot shoelaces. So I was sitting there thinking, this is pretty bad, but then it got worse. A cold, cold fog started creeping up the hill I was on, the mountain, and I also remembered this is actually the wettest place on earth, Waimea Canyon. So it could be worse. But a cold, cold fog, and then I remembered I had the emergency poncho. I took that out. Its thickness could be measured in terms of atoms. It was actually in my wallet, filed with the credit cards. And I put it on, and I sheltered in the cold, and I started shivering, and I realized it's not wild boar that's going to get me, it's hypothermia. And somehow, I made it through the night alive. And the sunset, it was the most beautiful sunset I'd ever seen. Just gorgeous. And so this time, a little wiser, I called 911. They picked up, but then I got put on hold. And I see my battery icon flashing. And a couple minutes later, it was the fire captain. He said, "Where are you?" And I was thinking, if I knew that, I probably would not be calling you. I said, "Lost Trail." And he said, "I've never heard of that." I said, "Well, it's in the canyon somewhere." He goes, "Okay, we're going to get a GPS signal on you." He goes, and I told him, the phone's dying. He said, we'll turn it off. We're going to GPS signal. It doesn't matter if your phone's on or off. So he's doing that, and I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to be really expensive. Someone told me once to be rescued cost $10,000, and that had been about a decade earlier, so adjusting for inflation, that could be around 13 grand. And you have to know something. I grew up with a mother who equated personal injury with the cost of medical care. If your injury was going to be really, really expensive, then you weren't really hurt. I remember coming in once after a bad bicycle accident. I was bleeding. I said, "Mom, look." And in compassion, she said, "Oh, shit." She always added an extra vowel so it wasn't swearing. And then she asked, I'm not sure if this is a rhetorical question, do you know how much that's going to cost? I don't know, Mom. I'm 8 years old. I'm bleeding profusely. I don't know if I can make that calculation right now. All right, get me my sewing kit. Please, Ma, no. I can see my femur. All right, get in the car, but there goes your allowance. So this is on my mind. So I get back on the phone with the police or the fire captain. He says, we're going to send you a helicopter. I said, oh no, that's okay. That's okay. Do you have mules or something like that? I said, I think I can walk out. There's plenty of light I have all day. He went, no. Stay where you are, the jungle. It all looks the same. You'll get turned around. We're coming for you. So I said, okay. So I turned the phone off again, and I'm waiting, and about a half hour later, I hear the chopper. And it's coming up the canyon, but it's on the wrong side. So I get back on the phone. I said, I hear you, but it's the wrong side. He said, okay, we're coming over. And then he asked, is there a break in the canopy? And I said, no, it's just like a roof up there. I can't see the sky. He said, okay, just don't go anywhere. Helicopter came over. The phone dies. It's over. And then the helicopter leaves. Just goes away. I was in shock. I remember saying, oh, shit. And I sat there. I didn't know what to do, but I did stay put. And then, sure enough, the chopper comes back, and this time it's right over the canopy, and I remember the old, now tattered, yellow poncho. And I took it out and just started swinging it around. And the next thing I know, there's a paratrooper breaking through the canopy. It's incredible sound. It's like, there's centipedes and scorpions and wild boar flying all over the place. This guy comes down. He hooks me into a harness. Our faces are like this. Had it been COVID time, this wouldn't have been good. And I got hooked in. He put a helmet on me, and we went breaking through the canopy, breaking branches. And then we were suspended from the helicopter, and I thought we're going to be retracted inside. But we just dangle there. And then we start going. And I'm looking at the cable thinking, is this 1/2 inch, 5/8? Is this galvanized? It's pretty humid here. And then I look down, and it is spectacular. The canyon's, it's incredible view, and I'm thinking, if this is $10,000 or 13, it's worth every penny. So I get the ride of my life. Until we get to a clearing where the other rescue workers, there's a fire truck, and then came the descent of shame. From the heavens I was lowered. And when I landed, there wasn't a lot said. I apologized. We got in the truck and started down the dirt road, and they said they're going to take me to my car, and I thought, thank God, because I have no idea what that thing is. And then what I feared, the question I feared, it came. It came from the captain himself who was driving. He looked over his shoulder. I was in the back, and he said, by the way, what do you do for a living? There was a long pause, just like this one. And I knew there are two answers. I could tell him I'm a massage therapist, which is true, but the other half of the year I'm an adventure guide. And I thought, they've done so much for me, I owe them something. So I said, I'm an adventure guide. He said, what? The whole crew started laughing. He goes, you're kidding me, right? I said, I wish I was. Then he got on the radio. He said, get this, guys. The guy we rescued, He's an adventure guide. And so I was. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Oh my. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you to our title sponsor, Blackfoot Communications. And thank you to our ASL interpreters, Bonnie Curian and Denise May. Most especially, though, to our storytellers. I hope they're coming. Tess Sneeringer, Joyce Gibbs, Lizzie Judah, Brent Ruby, Rachel Bemis, Darius Janczewski, Katrina Farnum, and Jeff Ducklow. Thank you all so much. Watch for that survey in your email. And the next Tell Us Something is June 27th. Go to tellussomething.org to pitch your story. Click Tell a Story. Thank you so much. Have a great night.